Hello, my friends. So I'm back after a brief hiatus, and I was not under a rock. Actually, I was learning how to cut my own hair because since I have so much left, and I really want a 30% discount at least from the barbers, which they don't give to me. So I learned to do it myself. But the other thing I learned to do was to upload the user profile pictures from Graph within SharePoint. Why would you do so? Let's say you have a search based on SharePoint, people search, and you would like to have the images also associated with that search results for the people, and you would like it to be synced with Office 365 slash Graph. Unfortunately, that's not the case right now. And more unfortunately, SharePoint user profile does not have any equivalent in the Graph SDK, in the Graph world. So we don't have an endpoint or API for it, which is dommage. I would really like Microsoft to put that functionality. It will streamline our life so much. So that's the other utility I wrote, and let's get started to see how that thing works.
So the proof of the pudding is in eating it, right? So let's see what we are talking about. This is my office tenancy, and you can see that I have an image, which is this kind of a building, but the same image is not available in my SharePoint environment. So if I could go here, let's go to SharePoint. I need to go to more features, open the profile services. Now, let's look for my ID. Blah, blah. And as you can see, the picture is not reflected in SharePoint. Uh, so let's go ahead and run this utility first and make sure that it is working, and then we will go through in detail of how the whole thing works. So let me run it. So there it goes. It's initializing this SharePoint web service for doing the updates, doing some magic, blah, blah, blah. And let's see if my profile picture is uploaded here. And there it is. Now, great. Let's see how to go about writing this piece of logic. Now, there are some prerequisites before we start running this application. The first is to register this application in our Azure environment so that it can read all the Graph users and download their pictures. The way to do that is to go to app registrations and you click on new registration. In my case, I have already created it, which is my OneGraph read. Important thing to copy from here once you configure is the application ID, which is like the username of this application, and also the password, the client secret. So you can generate a new one by clicking new client secret and copy the value over here. Important thing to note is that it's only one time that it will be shown fully, so make sure that you copy it. If you have forgotten about it, you don't know where it is, then just regenerate the thing again. And then also API permissions, where we specify what all this application can do. So over here, I've specified that it can read all the users' profiles. Having done that, we copy the tenant ID, application ID from the main page. So these things, and we need to copy this thing over, replace them with values over here. Please go ahead, start hacking my tenant, because I'm an idiot and I'm showing the full client ID and client secret. But I can assure you that I'll be deleting it in a minute. The next thing we need to do is to add a reference to the SharePoint csom, to the SharePoint web service, so that we can upload the picture, the stream, into SharePoint. Unfortunately, it's not part of Graph yet. So my request to Microsoft would be to please, before you add any more functionality to SharePoint, please go ahead and expose all the application, all the functionality, all the APIs via Graph, because that will streamline our jobs so much. Right now, it's again the old school web services. I'm pretty sure the old, the SharePoint gurus over here would know what we are talking about. If you're new to SharePoint and you have this requirement, simply copy paste these files from this solution from GitHub and into your own solutions, and it should work. And then I specify the profile and my site URL, and of course the target library path. This is the folder within, I think, OneDrive, users OneDrive, where the pictures are stored so that SharePoint can read them. One funny thing over here is that this profile pictures, this library is synced to all the users, to every user's OneDrive. So all the users have the pictures over there. That's how Microsoft went about it. So we will stick to it. Nothing major over here. And then we have the set profile picture from Graph. Let's see what I'm doing over there. So that's my initialized web service. So basically initializing the client web service for SharePoint. Let's see what I am doing there. Go to definition. Pretty straightforward. I pick up the URL to the user profile service from SharePoint. I do some magic. Yeah, get the secure password. You can use user IDs and password since it's not still supporting OAuth. So you'll have to create an account for that. I create the credentials, specify protocol, and yeah, the rest is just initializing the cookies and everything. So this will give me an object which will talk to SharePoint behind the scenes and upload the profile picture. I create my graph, the scopes, and then I create the token credential options over here. This is the way to talk to graph. Basically, that's what I'm initializing over here. A quick note over here to make my life easier. We are using a NuGet package, which is graph SDK. Let's look for it, and these two. So make sure to use this one. They will really streamline our job in getting the users and their pictures. So let me show you what I'm talking about. If I look into my get users function where I get all the users, I am able with the graph client with this SDK, just within these three function lines, I can get all the delta users. So that means the users whose profile has been changed, modified, or dirtied. So I get those delta users from the system, from graph, and then I simply add them to my collection object. As simple as that, that's all I need to do to get all the users. If I'm not using graph, then what you need to do is to manually call the endpoint directly, which is graph.blah blah blah /users/delta, and then you will get the result back with the graph client. This graph client is simply an HTTP client object, so not really graph SDK. So you make a call to that graph endpoint, you get the JSON result back, read all the values, in the users, and then because it's paginated results, you need to read the odata.next link and then make the call again. You see, all this mumbo jumbo, I don't need to really worry about. I don't even need to worry about creating my HTTP client if I'm using the graph SDK. So please do go ahead and use it. That's one point. Second is, be a bit cautious about this line of code, the delta line of code, because what might happen that you would have some other upstream systems. Maybe it's your AD, maybe it's some identity management system which is running some kind of a job which updates all the user profiles every day, or majority of user profiles every day. In that case, this system is going to run for about, depending upon, of course, how much load you have, how many users you have, but for a mid-level organization, it might be tens of hours before the process ends. So you would have to fine tune it, maybe have all the users into your database and then call directly the database and read and make the call to graph to get the pictures. So be a bit cautious about it. And also, most importantly, this would return back the external users, also the guest users within your system. So you might want to tackle on that part over here. If the UPN is starting with ext, then don't even bother about downloading users pictures, for example. That's my get users function. So let's see, I get my users, and for each users I do some printing, nothing major about it. And this is where I get the request. I get the photo for that user. Again, if I was not using Graph SDK, I'll have to create the HTTP client again, which is lot of hassle. I get the result photograph, and then this is standard SharePoint page, SharePoint functionality to upload the picture to SharePoint web service. Nothing major about it. Upload to image to SPO. Yeah, that's where the whole thing is. I'm trying to resize the images because the way it works in SharePoint is that you need to have three different kind of images. So I read the value from the graph. That's my profile picture stream from the graph. And then I resize them and upload them to SharePoint. Pretty straightforward if you are from SharePoint background. Let me see if there is anything else which we need to discuss over here. Again, talking to SharePoint web profile, SharePoint user profile service, and updating the values within the URL values within the SharePoint. And of course the properties, that's okay. Get single property, yeah, we don't really need any one of them. I think rest of them is pretty straightforward. One more thing I would like to discuss over here is the rather not problem but the issue of refreshing the tokens. It's a standard OAuth implementation that the token value is valid for only for 1 hour, and after that your graph client token is not refreshed anymore. I'm not really sure about if that is also a problem with the graph SDK. Maybe the SDK itself refreshes itself. But if it's not, then I came up with a handy little nugget of code. So what I usually do is when I'm looping through downloading the graph, downloading the users and images, etc., I have this piece of code which really helps. I get the current time, and if my current time and the start time is more than 45 minutes already, then I simply initialize my web service again and I get a new graph object. So this way I get these two objects every 45 minutes, and this will save me from the hassle of refreshing my tokens. Otherwise you might get an token expired error or something like that.
So that was it, and I hope you enjoyed it, and it will be useful to you in case you are also looking to have the same functionality implemented. Do let me know in the comments what you think about it. Also what you think about my new hairstyle and my proficiency in cutting it myself. And if you like my videos, please hit like, share and subscribe. It will motivate to come out of my laziness and do more videos like this. So for the next time, bye bye.